Welcome. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us on our webinar today. We're very excited to have a discussion today about a topic that I think is really broadly interesting and important to anybody in education. And we have two of my favorite people in the world here to help us out and to share some of their ideas on it. So our webinar today is going to be on establishing relevance in the classroom, strategies for helping students to see the why of learning. My name is Jason Johnson, and I will be moderating the discussion, which means I'm going to just try to get our two panelists talking and then kind of stay out of the way. A couple of logistical things for you, if you can help us out with. If you don't mind, we want these have been the most, I think, productive when the chat tool kind of turns into a place where people are sharing ideas throughout the webinar. And so if you're willing, adjust your settings in the chat tool so that you're sharing your comments with panelists and attendees. If you're only sharing your comment with panelists, then the three of us as panelists are the only ones that can see your comments. So if you're willing, make that slight adjustment in your chat tool so that you're sharing comments with panelists and attendees, and that'll make it so that everybody can see what you're commenting. And then we've got one of our a friend from our organization named Sai. He's going to be helping us in the chat tool, and he'll share some links throughout. If there's anything on here that you want to tweet out about, or if you want to follow us on social media or anything like that. So, but we're excited. So let me introduce our two panelists, and then we're going to jump right into our discussion. We have with us today two phenomenal experts in this field. First, we've got with us Mr. Bruce Bushnell. Bruce centered his career around promoting youth success. He's an award-winning school counselor. Bruce was named the Counselor of the Year for the state of Utah, was also honored at the White House, receiving national recognition for his counseling interventions. Bruce has been a member of the Executive High School Relations Board, Senior Vice President of the Alpine Counseling Association, and Vice President of the Utah Counselor Association. Bruce now helps youth succeed by presenting passionate WhyTry keynotes and trainings across the country. As an advocate of the program from its earliest days, Bruce has been a key contributor in developing many of the WhyTry learning activities, which are proven to help youth develop the social and emotional skills necessary to reach their goals. In fact, we're going to be talking about today has been influenced from its very earliest creation by Bruce. So we're thrilled to have Bruce with us. Welcome, Bruce. How you doing?
Thank you. Excited to be here. Love being with Corey and you, and looking forward to it. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, next we have Corey Anderson. Corey spent nearly 2 decades as an educator, beginning as a teacher and then as an administrator. He's been an assistant principal at a middle school and has served as a principal of 2 different elementary schools. Corey pioneered and started one of 2 public STEM programs in the state of Utah and helped consult with the State Office of Education on creating STEM standards for schools that would eventually be adopted by the STEM Action Center. Also during his tenure as an elementary school principal, Corey oversaw behavioral units and led his school in implementing social and emotional programs and STEM activities. In 2019, Corey joined the WhyTry organization as a trainer and director of curriculum development after using its socially emotional tools for close to 10 years in his administrative duties. Welcome, Corey. Thrilled to have you.
Thank you. Excited, as always. Thanks for the invitation.
And then I will be your moderator. My name's Jason Johnson. I'm a school psychologist. I have worked in elementary, middle, high school environments. I've been published on the topic of resilience. I've been with the WhyTry organization for between 5 and 6 years now. And it's just been an awesome experience to be able to work at a little bit more macro level and really become friends and fellow collaborators with some of the most incredible educators I've ever met and therapists I've ever met throughout the country. And it's just a really fun opportunity to be part of this community that I think these webinars have really become a nice representation of. So today we're going to be talking about the concept of relevance, and the three of us as panelists, we all have connection to the WhyTry program. WhyTry as an organization has been hosting these webinars all through last year. We did almost 30 of these last year, and we're on course. In fact, at the end of the webinar today, I'll tell you a little bit about what we have scheduled for next week. We're excited. We've got I think what will be a pretty fun webinar for next week. But today we're going to be discussing relevance, and that's a topic that is really central to our whole approach in the WhyTry organization. Some of you may have heard, or if you're familiar with the WhyTry approach, our whole organizational approach to social emotional learning and engagement is built on this model that we call the new 3 R's. And the new 3 R's stand for relationship, relevance, and resilience. And I'm not going to really go into too much detail on that model today because I want to save as much time as I can for Corey and Bruce. But we're going to focus in on that second R, which is the R of relevance. And relevance, I think, really kind of becomes the key to engagement and motivation and helping kids kind of find their why within the classroom. And so with that as a kind of a present beginning point for our discussion, I'm going to throw it over to Corey now and let Corey kind of take over and tell us more about this topic of relevance.
Hey, thank you,
Corey.
Jason. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm excited to be here with you. I appreciate the shout out, James, to my tie. It is my bird tie that really is old, and yeah, it's pretty old, but anyway, thank you for the shout out. Hey, so I'm excited to be here. Anytime I can come on and talk about working with kids, working with youth, I appreciate the opportunity, especially the topic we're talking about today, which I think is something that every single person who obviously is on this webinar, deals with, but every educator from coast to coast is always coming across and working with students that are unmotivated, that don't seem to be dialed in, that are difficult to reach. And it's hard to make things relevant for those students, right? And so I love the opportunity to talk about this. And I think, it really is the reason that a lot of us go into education is to work with not just all youth, but we head into it knowing that there are at-risk youth out there. There's students dealing with real issues, real problems going on in their lives, which are a lot of times, almost every time, no fault of their own. So it can create some of the most rewarding, I think, moments of your career when you work with students who, when they come to you, you can tell they have completely disengaged from the public school system or whatever system you're working through. And so it does provide an opportunity to create some of the most rewarding relationships and experiences. But at the same time, it also creates some of the most difficult moments in your career as well. It requires an emotional sacrifice on your own side to really invest in the students that you're working with. And so I recognize that, but it's exciting. So let's talk about it. We all got on this webinar to talk about students that we're having a difficult time motivating and that we're having a difficult time making things relevant for them. So before I launch into any of the ideas that I want to talk about today, I guess I would like in the chat window, and Jason, thank you for reminding them, if you don't mind, change your setting from all panelists to all panelists and attendees so others can see your answers. But if you take a moment, and I realize there's close to 300 people on here, and so when I ask you guys to type in an answer, the screen is going to fly, but that's okay. That's okay. And if you'll take a moment, even come up with one answer to this question, I want you to think about the students that you're working with, and specifically some of those students that you might classify or label as being unmotivated. And I would ask, what are the reasons or the barriers that seem to create that unmotivated student, or what's going on in their lives that's creating that condition? We're going to take about 30 to 40 seconds, and I'm just going to give you an opportunity to just fill the chat window. And I know that a lot of them are going to be the same, but it'll it'll give me a few to look through and to mention. I'm seeing a lot of things about home life, about trauma, a lack of connection with peers and teachers, lack of support, lots of trauma, loss of routine. So the pandemic itself, right? COVID-19 has added to this quite a bit because of the lack of resources and the lack of access. Great answers, guys. Frustration, emotional, the difficulty controlling their emotions, personal characteristics, okay? Illness of family members, isolation, lots of stuff going on here, guys. No future outlook, no drive, okay? The goal setting skills, they're lonely, lack of confidence, failure. Yeah, awesome. And if some of you keep filling that chat window, that's okay. That kind of surfaced some of the ideas I wanted to talk about. You know, those are some major issues, obviously. And one of the most frustrating parts for us as educators is that we know, number one, a lot of those things are not, they're not a fault of the student that you're working with. And they certainly don't have control over some of those conditions. And then you have very little control over those conditions. And so it can be frustrating at times trying to figure out how to overcome barriers that you really have no control over. I'm going to share my screen here, so bear with me in case it glitches, but hopefully I do it pretty quickly. Everybody can see my screen. Is that?
Yep, you're all good.
Awesome. To set this up and to better understand the students that we're working with, I want you to think about those students that you just thought of as you answered that question. And, a lot of those students, if they were represented by this student that is standing in front of the wall, right? If the students you think about and that you work with on a daily basis, if this student on this figure is represented or represents them, I would ask you the question, if they're standing in front of a wall like this, that looks like it's twice their height, what can they see? What is their current view giving them? What is in their line of sight? And I noticed, immediately Ellen goes to the metaphor. She gets where we're going with this. Elizabeth and Lanice, if I pronounce that right, Lori, you're going straight to the literal metaphor, which I want to talk about for a moment. That's exactly right. Like these kids, they just see a wall. All they can see is brick or mortar. If they look left, right, their peripherals, they see this wall. And really, this wall does represent all of the things that you brought up in that initial question that I asked you, right? It represents the years of failure, the drugs, the anger, the fighting, the apathy, the belief that I can't, the family problems and trauma and lack of support, all of those things that wall represents. And so for that student, that's all they can see in their life. And if the other side of that wall represents their future, they certainly cannot see their future. All that really seems to encompass their vision and their road forward are these issues and these challenges that the wall represents. And that leads us to a point where this kids start to give up, and they start to ask themselves that question, why try, right? Why should I try? Well, if that's the students that you work with, one thing we definitely want to do is try to give you some tools and tricks to help these students and give you some ideas that we've come up with as we've worked with youth. And actually, as we've worked with educators from coast to coast, we've learned a lot, and we've participated in some great stories. And so we'd like to share a couple things. I'd love to share a couple things with you right now. This example I gave you, it actually reminds me, working with students who are dealing with these issues and that are unmotivated, reminds me of something that happened to me outside of education. I had an interesting experience. I was in when I was in a place where I lived, I kind of got into outdoor decor, right? Like for the first time in my life, I was really interested in bushes and plants and trees and stuff like that. And I planted a tree, and it was awesome. Like it sprung to life, it grew. I was super excited about it. And I started to think that, I've got a green thumb. I have a knack for this sort of thing. And so I was kind of looking around and thinking, I want to find some more exotic trees or different things to put in my yard. And so I came across one that I found was really interesting. It was very unique. It's called a Harry Lauders walking stick. And maybe some of you know this, right? Some of you may be familiar with this plant, but this tree is really, really, really unique. And especially when it doesn't have its leaves, it's like this really cool looking stylized branches going in every direction. So I took this tree and I planted it in another section of my yard, and I was really excited to grow this tree. So I start, doing the same thing I did with the other tree that I had a lot of success with. I would go through my watering patterns and all of those types of things that you do when you plant something. But I'll tell you what, after like 4 or 5 months, my tree didn't exactly go the route that I thought it was going to go. It quickly turned to look just like this. And I remember just being like really, really down about my tree looking like this and thinking, gosh, what am I doing wrong? And, I would continue to water it. And I think I increased the watering of it, and I would pass it every day. And every day I'd come out and I'd look at it and think, oh man, I have completely failed. And it was kind of this, moment of just of feeling pretty bad about myself that I wasn't as good as I thought I was at planting trees and taking care of them. But anyway, it got to a point where the branches, some of the tips of the branches were just snapping off. And I thought, this thing is dead. This tree is completely dead. And I was actually listening to this podcast one day. And as I listened to the podcast, someone was talking about a similar situation. And the botanist there, he made mention that, you really can actually go and check on a tree if it's alive or not by going down close to the base of the tree and scratching it with your fingernail. And if you can get some of that bark to come off, and if you can see, the right color underneath that bark, you'll know it's alive. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got to go try that. Gotcha. I got to go try that. And so I went and did that, and I scratched with my nail, and I can see that the tree is still alive, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's still alive. Because I was to the point of like, I'm just going to pull this tree out and throw it away. I failed here. And so I see this thing's still alive, and it gives me hope. And so I go and I start doing some more research, and I find out, I just had been doing the wrong things. I didn't put the tree in the right location in my yard. It needed less sun than all of the rest of the trees. It needed the right drainage and some different things. And I was like, well, I guess I got to try something different. And so I uprooted it. I planted it in a new location. I gave it another go. And, I was pretty excited when that thing started to blossom. And I fully realized that in reality, I just wasn't giving the tree what it really needed. And so that was this exciting moment for me. And I can't help but parallel that to sometimes what my work with the youth has been, where I will be working with the youth and I will just be going, do you know what? Nothing I am doing is working. Nothing I am doing is working. I am failing. I am failing. And sometimes you start telling yourselves that, but sometimes you just need to try something different that perhaps you hadn't thought of before. A lot of the students that we work with that are unmotivated, they come to school, and I think this slide that I've put up depicts how they can feel at times when they come to school. And the person on that stool many times represents an adult or an educator that just talks to them, gets them at school, and they start to just, it rattles around in their brain. It doesn't resonate. And it just feels like the adult is preaching to them or telling them how their life should be or how they should feel or what they need to be doing, right? And it can become so overwhelming that at a certain point, they're just like, I don't want to hear anymore, right? I'm done. And so with that in mind, let's move on to some strategies in the positive of this. When it comes to working with students who are unmotivated, students that we haven't necessarily been able to move the meter with in the past, and helping make things relevant for them, because that word relevance is key here. It's not like kids truly don't care. A lot of times they do care. It's just that the things that wall represents, it beats them down, and it causes them to have a different perception of their life and of their world. And until we do certain things that make it matter to them, they're always going to have that attitude that for some people on the outside makes them think, oh, this kid doesn't care, and he will or she will never care. But that's not true. That's not true. So what can we do? Well, I have a whole bunch of ideas here that I want to share regarding relevance and making things relevant for kids. But before I go there, I do need to plug one thing that Jason referred to at the start of this presentation, and that is relationship. That first R that Jason talked about was relationship. You know, I truly believe that our students have to believe in us, right? They have to believe in you before they will learn from you in many, many cases, especially with our at-risk students. They have had so many letdowns in their life from other adults. They have so many different sources of trauma that they are not going to lower those walls of insecurity. They are not going to open themselves up to learning until they believe in you. And the interesting thing about that is a lot of students that come to your class and come to your office and come to your schools and come to your organization, they are automatically going to believe in you because of your role and who you are and maybe their background and the supports they have at home, but not all of them are. And those are the ones that you really need to look at and say, I need them to know how much, I need them to believe in me before I can really move the meter with them. And there's a lot of different things you can do to make that happen, right? About building those relationships. And it's going to be unique and different from year to year, from setting to setting, from student to student. I'm not saying that it's just, you know, an easy thing. Hey, go make relationships with every single student and then you'll be able to make things relevant for them. It's not quite as easy as that, right? But there are some things that you can keep in mind. If you take an approach to building a relationship with students that is persistent, meaning that you don't think if I do something on day one, then I'm good, right? It's something you have to continually look at and work at in building that relationship. You have to be intentional. You have to constantly be thinking, I need to do more to build that relationship. And then you have to be strategic. And what I mean by that is that what works for one group of students or for one student doesn't necessarily work for all students. And especially those at-risk students that seem unmotivated, that seem like they don't care, that have a lot going on, you are going to have to use very strategic you're going to have to use very specific strategies with that student in order to win them over and help them know how much you care about them. So with that in mind, after you do create that relationship with your students, or at least in the process of doing that, there's some other things that you can do to make learning and education and everything relevant for those students so that the only thing that is in their life isn't just that source of trauma or whatever that wall represents. I want to share some of those with you. In the WhyTry program, actually, we talk about some of these, but they are universal. Whether you are using WhyTry approach or you are using other things, these strategies, we call them competencies. And what we mean by that are, these are skills that you can use to create a setting. So whether that's a classroom or an office or a school or a home visit, whatever it is, these are things that you can do to start to make things more relevant for the students, okay? And I've listed them here for you, and we don't have the time to dig into every single one of these, but I think you'll see, and if you are one of those faithful, like you come to these webinars frequently, I think you'll find out that we talk about a lot of these over time. And I know Bruce is going to hit one of these specifically, but these skills that you can incorporate to make education more relevant for students are surrendering the one up, which that term may be foreign to you, but that's a way to build a relationship with a student that, you know, Christian and Bruce here in this training and the whole WhyTry organization has developed towards how to build a relationship with students. We also have framing, using activities in your class and how to do that effectively, using video, using music effectively, using storytelling the right way, questions and processing, state changes, resilient listening, and flexibility. All of these are skills that will help you cultivate a patch of ground where you can plant that seed or plant that tree and really make things more relevant for the students. This right here is creating where the learning takes place. And then on top of that, there is also something you can do to make the actual content more relevant for your student. And that's the next slide that I want to share with you. The next slide I want to share with you are different components that you can include in your content to make things more relevant for students. And I'm going to read through these and then explain what I mean by it. So I have visual metaphors here. And what I mean by visual metaphors is really just using visuals to help students understand concepts or ideas or things that may be abstract. Also, learning activities, music resources, video media, multimedia, journals and art, real life stories, community projects, all of those things are components of lesson and curriculum and content that if you tap into all of these, you will make learning more relevant for the students. Why? Well, as I said earlier on, a lot of students come to you and they are prepared in a way that they automatically buy into you. And so they're ready for learning and they are going to learn from you, regardless of some of the tools you use, you have them. But for these students who are at risk and come to you, the truth of the matter is that unless you engage them in ways that they like to learn, unless you find ways to make the learning pop and come to life, and unless you really try to tap into different ways that students learn altogether, they just simply might not plug into what you're delivering. And so it's important to try to provide an experience for them from a whole smorgasbord, a whole menu of resources to help a concept come to life. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. So what I'd like to do for you now, if there's, let me go there now. I'm going to actually switch here with my share window. So I apologize for that. Once again, I hope this transfer goes okay. New share. Where I want to go and show you kind of some examples of what I'm talking about. I'm actually going to take you to the WhyTry resources that we use, but it'll give you an idea of what I'm referring to when I'm talking about that content. Let me maximize that for you so you can see that. So what we're looking at here is this is actually the toolkit that we use when we deliver WhyTry lessons. But once again, I love showing this because it can become a very universal idea and approach that people can use, whether or not they are using WhyTry. We have something that we call the flexible lesson plan. And what we try to do is we try to get all of our users to get to a point that when they are delivering social emotional learning lessons, that they can actually use the flexible lesson plan to deliver those lessons. And if you look at this lesson plan, it is very similar to what I just showed you on that slide. When we deliver a social emotional learning lesson to students, so if we're trying to teach them about the concept that the decisions I make today will affect tomorrow, or to evaluate their peer relationships and whether they are positively or negatively influencing their friends around them, whatever concept we are trying to teach, we are going to try to teach that concept by tapping into as many of these different resources as possible. You'll notice there it has a warm-up activity or a video clip. We do some sort of visual walkthrough. We try to use music or that learning activity, video and multimedia. Booster activity is referring to things like journal prompts, art activities, game plan activities, goal setting type things. And then we also always try to tap into other resources like our own personal stories and stories of students and stories of real world examples that resonate with the students you work with. And so our idea is, if we can get our users to feel confident that they have a menu of all of these different types of resources, they are going to be able to provide a dynamic lesson that students are going to be more interested in than perhaps what they were used to throughout their years of education. And so we really like getting people prepared to use that flexible lesson plan to help them get there and to help them prepare. Every single one of our units, as you can see here, if you can read those names, we provide for them visual metaphors, right? So when you go there, you're going to be able to see all of these different visual metaphors that we use to help teach concepts to students. And whether you're using this or other visual metaphors that you come across, that can be, students love to learn visually. We have lots of learning activities that we tap into. Learning activities are basically, we have types that are object lessons. We have types where we give students an activity and we ask them to engage with one another and solve problems together. And so we have lots of different activities like that that we try to get kids involved in that ultimately will resonate back to the lesson concept. Like I said, we have journal and art boosters and things like that. We have video resources, music resources, book lists that we tap into. All of these things are going to contribute to creating lessons where students are going to engage more than they ever have before. So in wrapping up, before I go there, I will point out over here on the right side of this, because it relates back to what I shared before. You'll notice over here on this right side where it says engagement strategies, we really do push those things that you can do to create the right environment for students to come in and want to learn and start to see, more relevance in their learning than ever before. And so we have those here where we can drill into them and you find out more about what we mean by each one of those. So in wrapping all of that up, and I'm going to stop sharing there, the bottom line is that it's not necessarily sequential, right? Like it is very important to deliver or to create relationships with the students you're working with. And the more you can get them to buy into you before you deliver content, the better. But the bottom line is that you still have to keep moving forward, right? A lot of you are content teachers. Some of you are not, but you have certain things that you have to move forward with. And so it becomes this balance of simultaneously continuing to build that relationship and continuing to work at trying to get them to buy into you, while at the same time creating lessons that engage them in ways they like to learn. And if you can combine those two things, you are going to be able to make learning come to life and make learning more relevant to a lot of those students more than ever before. And, of course, you're going to have those students that it really takes a long time to work with, and they'll try to make it seem like, they just put walls up and they're not listening. But never underestimate that this type of approach really is sinking in and resonating with them, and it just takes a little bit of time. So those are my thoughts. I'm going to kick it over to you, Jason, if there's no questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Corey. Great job. Appreciate that. Now, a couple people have asked, this is being recorded. And so by Monday, this will be back up on our website. So if you want to review some of the strategies that Corey shared, you'll be able to do it that way. And then we have a game plan. Well, I'll talk about it after Bruce shares some of his ideas that I think will be kind of an engaging way to weave some of these strategies that we have throughout the year. We're going to continue to do these webinars throughout 2021. And I think we have a nice game plan to be able to continue to get some nice strategies in your hands. So I'm going to throw over to Bruce now and have him talk a little bit. I liked how Corey presented it with the kind of the simultaneous view of content and competencies. The way I look at that, I think all of us as educators, there's times where we have to be real good technicians. We have to be technically sound, at what we're doing. And then there's times where we almost have to be artists, where we're kind of responding and adapting to the environment that we are presenting in. And I think having a good organization around both your content and your competencies, so your what and your how, can really help with that. And so Bruce, we're going to have Bruce highlight one of the competencies that I think Bruce really is both an excellent technician, but also I think he's a little bit of a genius artist in this area as well. And this has everything to do with relevance and engagement. And this is going to be the competency of framing. So Bruce, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to switch over to share and make sure I get there. And It's always my biggest fear because I'm not a technician when the technology does not work. Can everybody see that?
Yep, you're good, Bruce.
Okay, we are up. Let me just say, first of all, I love what Corey presented. It set a really good frame or what I want to talk about, and I think he did a great job. I got so into what he was doing, I forgot I was presenting. I almost could have gone off and not been here at the end. It was so good. Thank you, Corey. And you know, we want, whenever we're working with students, and Corey talked about students more, maybe a little more, have more struggles or challenges or at risk, but I think being this during this pandemic, and again, we have a lot of challenges with students that aren't motivated and they're apathetic and they're not attending or showing up or they're not engaged. But I just want, this is what we're talking about, can be for all students, because all students have challenges. They have anxiety, depression, fears, a variety of things they're dealing with and with what we're going through. And so as a teacher, counselor, I always wanted to prepare my students to receive my message, to receive my lesson, whatever I was going to present. And how I did that a lot of times was the key to how they received it and how they participated and got involved in what we were doing, engaged with what we were doing. So one of the competencies that Corey showed on the slide was framing, effective framing. And I would like to just do just kind of a mini workshop on framing, but it really can be one of the keys. I don't know if I call it a strategy, more of a technique or skill or a competency like we've talked about, but it can connect you to your strategies to help your strategies be more effective and have students receive it. So our founder, one of our founders and our president of our company is a man by the name of Hans Magleby. He's an artist by nature. His dad was a famous artist. And they always said, you know, you need to have if you have a beautiful piece of artwork, you need to have a good frame. And a good frame can do a lot of things. It at least needs to be neutral, so it doesn't take away from the art, or it can be a frame that actually brings out the art or colors that's in the art. And so that stuck with me as we're talking to students. It's kind of like art. So example, here's some artwork. I'm going to put a frame on this first one. And I'm not asking you to go in the chat window, but what does this frame do for this art? Give you just a second to look at that. It's kind of obvious, but the frame distracts you from the art. You focus more on the frame. And sometimes we do that with students. We want them to focus on what our topic, our lesson, our content, whatever we're teaching, but how we deliver it to them almost does the exact opposite. I know I've done that multiple times, and I've gotten a lot better since we started focusing on this. So here's a different frame. Let's see how this frame does. That's a little more, it's at least neutral, if not, it enhances the warm colors and the art, and you focus more on the art. That's a better frame, and it brings you in. The same thing when we are wanting to reach our students and have them be engaged and have them be attentive and participate. And so I'd like to talk a little bit more about framing. Here's a quote from Gail Fairhurst, The Art of Framing. In essence, framing theory suggests that how something is presented to the audience, called the frame, influences the choices people make about how to process that information. And so it's basically, they make choices. Hey, is this something, do I want to be part of this, or I do not want to be part of this? Is this something for me? This creates buy-in. So I have one example, a story that just stood out to me. I was a mentor to a college group. They'd all got leadership scholarships in education to a university close by here. It was Utah Valley University. And they actually, it was kind of like a reality show in a lot of ways. They lived in the same complex or apartment area, and they did a lot of things together. But one of their requirements was to do something in the community to make a difference. And they had 5 choices, and our WhyTry program was one of the choices. And a majority of them chose to do something with WhyTry, to teach middle school students these social emotional life skills. And so I would meet with them once a week here at our offices, go through a lesson, then they would go out and deliver that lesson in middle schools. Sometimes they were the teacher was in the room or an educator, and they would just deliver the lesson. Other times the teacher was embracing and delivering the lesson, and they would assist that teacher. And so the first So on one day, I went out to kind of critique them and see, just give them suggestions and see how they were doing. I would prepare the lesson. They were ready to deliver. It was called Keys to Staying on Track. And so I went into one middle school, walked into the classroom, and there was no excitement. Kids, it's WhyTry time. It's time for our lesson on Keys to Staying on Track. They didn't act like they really wanted to be part of it. I said, something's different here. This is not what I'm normally seeing when WhyTry is done with Fidelity. And so, but this is not exaggeration. This is pretty close to what the teacher said. And I can't even remember the school, and that's good. But this is what the teacher said to the students. My two students they were in twos. My two students were just assisting. They really weren't doing much for this lesson. And the teacher made this comment. This is her frame. She said, well, they say we have to do this. Let's get this over with so we can move on to other things. Well, that activity and that lesson was basically like that frame we just saw that you focused. It wasn't a good frame for the art. It was a terrible activity. I wouldn't want to show it to anyone as an example. And but it was set up by the frame, and the students did not participate in a positive way. The very same day, went to another school. My two students were actually doing the lesson, walked into the room. There was excitement. I mean, there was a buzz. There was enthusiasm. They got up and they framed it in a way that was amazing. There was an activity, and they framed it. And I can't remember the exact words they used, but they said something similar to this. They said, you know, we have a challenge today and we have a reward if you're successful, but we're competing against all the other middle schools in our county today. And we just have a feeling that you guys can come out on top and have the winning time. And they had a scenario around the activity they were doing. It's called Keys to Staying on Track. And then they delivered it. And I wish we had a video. Those kids were so engaged, so bought in, and so motivated. And they cheered at the end. And then they tied it to the social emotional life skill, the principle. And the difference was had a frame that enhanced the art or enhanced the activity. And so that's always stood out with me and how important it is. And so like Corey said, a lot of times you have to be intentional when you think about frames, but a good frame does this. It answers, what is it? So what's the content? What is the lesson? What are you going to be delivering? Why is it important? And then what does it have to do with me? Why would I want to be part of this? Why would I want to learn this? Why would I want to participate and be engaged? And so, and then also a good frame, I think, establishes real value, that this is a worth. And the person delivers that frame, the teacher, counselor, educator, if the students know you care about it, you're passionate about it, you bought in, and you're excited about it, it does establish value. So it creates buy-in. It sells whatever, it's not really selling, but it helps promote whatever you're trying to teach. And then it prevents common roadblocks by lowering resistance levels. That story I told you, the first middle school, there was a lot of resistance, pushback, because of how it was delivered. And so it helps, definitely lower that and create that buy-in to what you're doing. So I have something that stayed with me for a long time, and I'd like to share it with you. And it's about hot dogs. Now, I know if you're in California, maybe you haven't had lunch yet, and I apologize. I owe you something if this destroys your day. But this was a young man, the story, but it relates specifically to framing and presentation. But a young man won a PTA reflection competition, and he did it through a video, and he showed a video of first these hot dogs. And I do love hot dogs. I love tons of hot dogs. I mean, any kind of hot dog. And I don't want to get into that because I'd be ready to have one. But when he showed the first video, we had two videos. The first video, he showed what went into making a hot dog. And I won't stay on this long, but after he got done, I will never eat a hot dog the rest of my life. It's over. Hot dog, and he saw what went into making the hot dog. And it was terrible. It was gross. I'll get the slide off now. I won't stay on that any longer. But it was absolutely the most, I can't even describe it to you. And so that was that was like maybe when we sometimes frame something in maybe not a positive, negative way, or it creates buy-in. But what winning the competition, and I'll never forget, I don't have his video. This is just a couple slides to represent it. But what won him the competition, it showed a couple in a formal dress. The man was in a suit and the woman was in a beautiful formal dress in a very elegant dining room table. And then it had on music. There was classical music playing, and you heard this beautiful music. And then in walked a waiter in a tuxedo with white linen all over his arm. And to the rhythm of the music, he took a napkin, went around and snapped the napkin, laid it down on the young lady, snapped the napkin, laid it on the young man. Then he went back, and then he came out with a platter, silver platter, with the most elegant hot dog. It's not as good as his video. It looks good, it looks fine. But the hot dog he delivered on this silver platter to the rhythm of the music, it was a designer bun. He took to the rhythm of the music and placed the hot dog down in the bun. He built the hot dog in front of them. He had about 6 different sauces that he put on it. He had bacon bits, onion bits, and he had the special relish and the special mustard, and he designed it and to the rhythm of the music. Then he delivered it to the couple. When he got done, I wanted to jump through that screen and have a bite of that hot dog so bad. And it said, hey, I'm not giving up hot dogs anymore, because it was so convincing. So that stuck with me. And so it's, again, how we present something, how we frame something or deliver it makes all the difference in the world. And sometimes we just slop things down to students. We just kind of, when we expect them, why aren't they excited? Why don't they embrace? It doesn't have to all be entertaining, but like Corey said, it has to be engaging. It has to bring them in. And so here's an example. How's my time? I'm getting all fired up now, and I may be going on for a while, but we're fine, I think. Here's just an example of just a frame. Every day we get to frame things that we're going to deliver to students, and so here's a statement. Here's a framing example. Statement: this is all we get for resources. It's just our tough luck. So maybe we could say that on a little bit. I mean, it still might be, we might lack the resources. It may not have a lot of resources, but could we frame that in a way that could be received a little bit more positively or in a more positive frame? So here's a reframe. Today, we get to tap it. Well, come back here. Go back to that hot dog. I was a little fast on that. Here's the reframe. I won't touch it now. Today, we get to tap into our creative skills. This is our objective, and these are our resources. Any ideas how to solve this dilemma? That's a little bit better frame, but it's something you have to practice. I've gotten more intentional when I'm delivering the lesson in social emotional. How are we going to deliver this activity, this visual metaphor, this music, whatever it is, this video, things Corey showed during his demonstration. And sometimes in a workshop, we have these kind of statements of how try to reframe it. I'm going to ask you to do one of them just in the chat window if you can do this. And Corey, Jason, I'd like you to just read a couple of those once they give you, if we see it. But number 5, this is the one I want to do, is number 5. That's impossible. That's impossible. How could you reframe that to be a more positive frame? Let's just see how our panelists do today, our attendees, and just read a couple of those, Jason.
Sorry, Bruce, what do you want me to read?
Just whatever the responses are. I'd like that if anybody can go to the chat window and put how they would reframe, that's impossible.
So one of the first ones that came in
yeah,
that's quite a challenge for us. I love that approach, like creating this as a challenge we're all working on. Francisca wrote that. Juan's was awesome. Let's do the impossible today. Did you have one stick out to you, Corey?
that one. I thought Juan's was excellent. Let's do the impossible today.
That's awesome. I love that frame.
Isabel said, challenge accepted.
you know, failure is not an option. I've had some people sometimes say that. I used to say when sometimes the students would say that's impossible or impossible, I'd say, you know, if anybody in this school or any group or any class could figure out a way to accomplish this, it would be you. And that's a good frame. So we could have gone over all of these, but thank you. But that's something that we need to maybe be a little more careful of how we present things, how we frame things. And just in closing, framing truly is a great way to create buy-in to the material from those that are our participants, our students. But in framing includes what we do, how we say it, and how we prepare our students to engage with the content of our lesson. And we can use framing to really build understanding. And so just a couple of, based on my two stories, whatever, what a good frame can do, just want to share just a couple things. It creates emotional hook. It can create enthusiasm and engagement. It avoids planting seeds of doubt, negativity, or apathy towards a message. It makes connection between the student comments or where the student is to course material. That's relevancy. It creates learner readiness. And I like this one. I really believe this is part of framing. And I'll close with this. It communicates from the person that's delivering, us as educators, teacher, counselor, administrator, behavioral specialist, whatever your role is. It communicates conviction, passion, enthusiasm, and a strong belief in the principle or the lesson that you were teaching, what is being taught. And it helps students to feel the same thing. And I think a lot of you experienced it when you have a teacher that's passionate about what they're teaching, it spills over to the students. So it's definitely a competency that we spend a lot of time on. It's just one of the 10 that Corey showed, but I think it really ties really nicely to making things relevant for students. And I'll stop there.
Awesome
back
job.
to you, Jason.
Thank you, Bruce. Great insights on that competency of framing. You can go ahead and stop your share now, Bruce.
Okay.
So I can't believe it always catches me off guard how fast time goes on these. We're basically almost up on our hour. Before I let everybody know kind of what our game plan is for next week and going forward throughout the year, any parting thoughts, Corey or Bruce, on this topic of relevance and using relevance to engage our kids?
I guess my only parting thought would be, you know, in the process of making this happen, there's a lot of things out there that can cause you to get down, but just if you continue to do it and bring it every day, the kids will follow. They will start to buy in, even if they didn't to begin with. So
awesome. Thank you. Any closing thoughts, Bruce?
Well, Corey talked a lot about the relationship. You got to stay consistent. Students sometimes test you out. They want to know that you're really going to stick with them. And when you have that relationship, you don't have to be perfect by any means because they know you really care. And then you do these things, these points, the things that we call it generational relevance. When we do a training, we need to make things relevant, meet kids where they are, give them a chance to have a voice and to share and find out what they care about, what they love. And that's why music and some of the other things we use helps bring them in so we can get them to be participating in the other things we want them to learn, whether that's an academic subject or social emotional learning.
Great insight. Totally agree. When we're talking about relevance, I think we need to consider generational aspects of relevance, cultural aspects of relevance, really anywhere where we're trying to speak directly to the lives of our kids that we're working with. All right, so a couple quick things before we wrap up. We did record this. This will be up on our website, hopefully by tomorrow, but definitely no later than Monday. You can access it by going to WhyTry.org and clicking on webinars. Here's the game plan going forward. We're going to continue to try to do these close to weekly. Sometimes it'll be every other week throughout 2021. We're going to bring in experts from different fields, but about once a month, we're going to try to highlight some of our competencies, strategies, lesson plans, virtual activities that Corey referenced a little bit in what he discussed. And so we're going to continue to share some of these. We want to get these in your hands so that you can use them to help out the kiddos that you're working with. And so we're going to keep doing that, like I said, probably about once a month. In the meantime, we'll keep bringing in experts. So next week, what we have that we're really excited about, it's going to be, I think, another important and timely topic, but we're going to be discussing supporting parents and supporting families, and how schools and educators can support parents and families to be resilient. We have some strategies that we're excited to talk about. We're going to have Christian Moore on. He's the founder of our program. He's a social worker. And then we've got a guest from the Parent Project. She's from Alabama, and her name is, well, I don't know if I should say her name yet or not. She's committed. Her name's Robin Mackey. She's from Alabama.
She's awesome.
One of my favorite humans alive, and she does work with the Parent Project. She's got incredible insight into supporting families, and so that's what we're going to be discussing next week. Super excited about it. We'll email out links. Hopefully you saw in the chat tool some of our links. The easiest way to stay up to date on these is to follow us on social media, and we'll try to continue to announce these on social media as well as through our email distribution list. Please invite your colleagues. We want this to continue to be a community where we can share ideas with one another. And it is really fun. Like every time I get back on one of these, it feels like I'm reconnecting with friends that I'm just excited to be with, because we all share that same passion for trying to help out kids. So we hope we'll see you all next week. And next week, we hope you'll even be willing to bring a friend or bring a colleague or guest, and excited to talk. Next week's will be on Wednesday instead of Thursday is the plan, but we'll send out an official announcement on that soon. So otherwise, I don't have anything else to add. Corey, Bruce?
Do you have a slide you're going to put up?
I'm going to put it up right now, and we'll play us out with some music, and I've got a slide. By the way, if you like this information and you're interested in a demo on any of this, we'll be happy to give you a demo. We'll even give you a complimentary copy of our book for taking a